I didn't believe in timing before Ethan Walker. I believed in effort, coincidence, luck, but not timing. Then he walked into my life on a Thursday that felt ordinary in every possible way, and suddenly every moment before him felt like it had been waiting. We met in a small used bookstore in Portland, one of those narrow places that smelled like dust and old paper and quiet lives. I was standing on a ladder, reaching for a book I couldn't quite touch, when I heard his voice behind me. "You're going to fall," he said calmly, like an observation rather than a warning. I turned, annoyed and then disarmed. He wasn't smiling, not really. Just watching me with a steadiness that made me feel strangely seen. "I've survived worse," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like a story." And somehow, without realizing it, I started telling him one. We talked for almost 2 hours between the shelves. About nothing important. About everything. He told me he worked in architecture, that he liked buildings because they stayed when people didn't. I told him I wrote essays I never published and that silence made me nervous. When the owner finally asked us to leave, it felt like being pulled out of a dream. Ethan walked me home even though it was out of his way. The city felt warmer with him beside me. He didn't rush conversation, didn't fill pauses just to avoid them. When we reached my door, neither of us moved. "I'd like to see you again," he said, simple and unguarded. So we did. Again and again. Love with Ethan didn't explode, it unfolded. Sunday mornings wrapped in blankets. Late night drives with the windows down. Fingers brushing, then intertwining, like our bodies had decided before our minds did. He listened when I spoke, really listened, like my thoughts mattered. When I doubted myself, he never argued, he reminded. One night, lying on his chest, I asked him what scared him most. He didn't answer right away. Then quietly, losing something I didn't know I needed until it was gone. I should have recognized the weight of that sentence. But love, when it's new, makes you believe you're untouchable. And in those months, with his hand steady in mine, I truly believed we were. I didn't notice myself fading at first. No one ever does. It happened quietly, like the way daylight slips out of a room before you realize the sun has gone down. At the beginning, it was small things. I slept longer but woke up more tired. My thoughts felt heavier, as if I had to drag them through fog just to finish a sentence. Ethan would ask me how my day was, and I'd open my mouth only to realize I didn't know how to answer anymore. "I'm just exhausted," I kept saying. He'd nod, but his eyes stayed on me a second too long. The woman he fell in love with used to light up rooms without trying. I laughed easily. I reached for his hand first. I made plans. Somewhere along the way, that glow dimmed, and I didn't know how to explain its absence without sounding ungrateful for the life I had. Mark noticed everything. He always had. "You forgot your coffee again," he said one morning, gently, holding up the mug I'd left untouched. I wasn't thirsty. "You always drink it." I snapped at him then. I didn't mean to, but irritation lived closer to the surface now, sharp and unfamiliar. His face fell not in anger, but in confusion. That was worse. Weeks passed, and the distance between us grew in inches, then miles. I canceled dinners. I stopped answering messages right away. Some nights, I lay beside him feeling like my body was there, but I wasn't. He'd wrap an arm around me, and I'd stiffen, not because I didn't love him, but because I was afraid he'd feel how empty I'd become. One night, he finally said it. "I feel like you're slipping through my hands," he whispered in the dark. "And I don't know what I'm doing wrong." That broke something in me. I sat up, heart pounding, words fighting to get out. How do you tell the person you love that you don't recognize yourself anymore? That you wake up every day feeling further away from who you were? That you're scared he'll see the worst parts and decide you're too much work? "I don't know what's happening to me," I admitted, my voice shaking. "I'm trying, Ethan. I swear I am." He pulled me into his chest, holding on like I might disappear if he loosened his grip. "We'll figure it out," he said, too quickly, too firmly. But fear had already crept in. I could feel it, his, mine, ours. Love didn't leave the room that night, but certainty did. And once certainty is gone, everything feels fragile, even the strongest hearts. Ethan didn't fall apart loudly. He did it in fragments, small, careful pieces he thought I wouldn't notice. He stopped asking how I felt because he was afraid of the answer. He stopped sharing his own worries because mine already filled the room. And in that quiet, something in him began to erode. I could see it in the way he stared at walls longer than necessary, as if waiting for them to explain something. In how he reread the same sentence on his phone, thumb hovering, never scrolling. He was still beside me every night, still kissing my forehead before sleep, but his mind was elsewhere, lost in a maze of questions with no exits. I hated myself for noticing. I hated myself more for being unable to stop it. Sometimes I'd wake up and find him sitting at the edge of the bed, shoulders hunched, hands clasped like he was praying to something he didn't believe in anymore. "You okay?" I'd ask softly. "Yeah," he'd say. Always yeah. Always a lie we both accepted. He started carrying his love differently, quieter, heavier. He researched late into the night, tabs open about symptoms, disorders, unexplained fatigue, emotional dissociation. Words like progressive and chronic glowed on the screen like threats. When he thought I wasn't looking, his jaw tightened, like he was holding himself together by force alone. But he never left. On my worst days, when even lifting my head felt impossible, he brought me water, brushed my hair back, whispered stories about places we'd visit when this passed. He said it like a promise, like belief alone might bend reality. "I'm not going anywhere," he told me once, his voice steady even as his hands shook. "You don't have to save me," I whispered. "I know," he said. "I just want to stay." Yet staying was costing him. He laughed less, smiled slower. The man who once teased me about overthinking now stared into space, like he was trapped inside his own. Love had become a battle he refused to surrender, even as it stripped him down. One evening, I caught him crying silently in the kitchen, forehead pressed against the cabinet door. He didn't hear me at first. "Mark." He wiped his face quickly, forcing a breath. "I'm fine." But his silence said everything he wouldn't. He was afraid. Afraid of losing me. Afraid that loving me wouldn't be enough. And still, every day, he chose to fight quietly, stubbornly, because walking away would have hurt more than breaking. And that was when I realized something terrifying. My fading wasn't just taking me. It was taking him too. The truth didn't arrive gently. It never does. It came piece by piece, like shards of glass Ethan kept cutting his hands on because he refused to stop digging. It started with patterns, ones I was too tired to notice. The way my headaches worsened at home, but softened when we stayed at his sister's place. How my thoughts felt clearer outdoors, how my chest felt lighter after hours away from our apartment. Ethan watched these details stack up like evidence in a trial no one else was willing to hold. "You're not imagining this," he said one night, his voice sharper than I'd heard in months. "Something is happening to you." Doctors had dismissed me gently, efficiently. Stress, anxiety, burnout. They told me to rest more, to meditate, to be patient. Ethan nodded politely in those sterile rooms, but I could feel the rage coiled beneath his calm. So he started his own investigation. Air quality kits arrived in the mail. He scraped samples from the bathroom walls, the vents, the corners behind furniture we never moved. I watched from the couch, wrapped in a blanket, feeling guilty for how weak I'd become and terrified of what he might find. When the results came back, his face went pale. Black mold. Severe exposure. Long-term toxicity. I didn't understand the words at first. I just watched his hands tremble as he read the report again and again, like repetition might soften the meaning. Then I felt it, the sudden, crushing clarity. I wasn't disappearing. I was being taken. By something invisible. Something silent. Something that had been poisoning me while life went on like normal. "I should have seen this sooner," Ethan said, voice breaking for the first time. "This isn't your fault," I whispered, though part of me believed love should have protected me. He didn't sleep that night. Or the next. He called lawyers, landlords, specialists. He packed our things with an urgency that bordered on desperation. We moved out in 48 hours, leaving behind furniture, memories, the illusion of safety. In the chaos, something fierce ignited in him. "This doesn't get to take you," he said, gripping my face, eyes burning with purpose. Not like this. For the first time in months, hope flickered. Fragile. Uncertain. But real. And as we stepped into an unknown future, I realized the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. Ethan was no longer the same man who had walked into that bookstore months ago. Love had reshaped him in ways I hadn't anticipated, both beautiful and brutal. Every day he fought for me, but that fight left scars not on his skin, but carved deep into his soul. Before, he was steady, calm, almost effortless in his confidence. Now, there was an edge to him, a tension that never fully left. His eyes carried sleepless nights spent scrolling through research, calling specialists, confronting landlords, arranging moves, making sure our lives remained safe. Even when he smiled, there was a weight beneath it, a knowledge that every moment of peace could be stolen away in an instant. I watched him one evening as he sat at the small kitchen table in our new apartment, hunched over a stack of papers. The golden light of the lamp fell across his face, highlighting the faint lines at the corners of his eyes. His hand trembled slightly as he sipped his coffee. "Do you ever sleep?" I asked softly. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared out the window, as if searching for answers somewhere beyond the city. Then, almost to himself, he said, "Sleep isn't for people like us. Not right now." That was Ethan, relentless, stubborn, unwilling to let go of love, even when it demanded everything. He became a protector, a fighter, someone who carried both our burdens and his own with silent determination. But I saw the cost in quiet moments, the way he clenched his fists when frustrated, the hollow look when he thought I wasn't watching, the brief flashes of anger he never directed at me but at the unfairness of the world. And yet, in spite of everything, he remained tender. He would bring me tea at midnight when my head ached, trace his fingers along my arm when panic rose, whisper stories of the places we would go once my strength returned. Love had hardened him, but it had also softened him in ways only I could see. One afternoon, as we walked along the river, I stopped and looked at him. "Ethan, you're different," I said. He paused, taking a deep breath. "I had to be. For you. For us." His hand found mine. "Love doesn't just lift you. Sometimes it breaks you into pieces, and you put yourself back together, stronger in some ways, scarred in others." I nodded, understanding fully. I had seen him fight shadows, seen him wrestle with helplessness, watched him sacrifice comfort and safety for the sake of our love. He had changed. He had become someone more complex, more layered. Someone whose heart bore the weight of devotion in ways I could never repay. And yet, even in his transformation, I saw beauty. A love that could endure, that refused to let go, that demanded sacrifice and gave back strength. Ethan was no longer the man I met on the fire escape of that September night, but he was the man who had saved me in ways that went beyond life and death. I touched his face and felt the warmth, the determination, the resilience that had grown from our trials. In that moment, I realized the truth. Love had not only changed him, it had reshaped the way we existed together. We were bound not just by affection, but by endurance, by pain, by the sheer, unrelenting force of caring for another human being so fully that it demanded your soul. And in that realization, I knew, even if the world had tried to take pieces of us, Ethan and I were unbreakable in ways that were no longer fragile, no longer fleeting. We were carved from the same struggle, the same fight, and the same relentless devotion. Love had remade him, and in doing so, had remade us both. We had survived storms, both silent and raging, but love, I learned, is never painless. It leaves marks not just on the skin, but on the soul. Every scar, every sleepless night, every whispered reassurance carried the weight of what we had endured together. Ethan and I sat on the balcony of our new apartment, the city stretching out below us, lights flickering like distant stars. I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his chest. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Words had become fragile in the past months. Silence, paradoxically, had become safer, more honest. "I never imagined love could hurt this much," I whispered. He tilted his head, brushing a loose strand of hair from my face. "It's supposed to," he said softly. If it didn't, it wouldn't be real. Love leaves traces because it matters. Pain is just the proof that you've cared enough to feel every part of it. And he was right. Pain and love were inseparable for us, two sides of the same coin. Every fear we had faced, every tear we shed, every night we lay awake imagining losing each other, all of it had carved us into something new. Not broken, not defeated, but alive, raw, and infinitely human. I remembered the early days, the excitement of our first meeting, the warmth of his hand in mine on fire escapes, the quiet intimacy of our conversations that lasted until dawn. And now, that love had endured the shadow of sickness, fear, and uncertainty. It had changed us, yes, but it had also deepened us, anchored us in ways neither of us could have foreseen. Ethan's fingers traced patterns along my arm, each touch a reminder, a promise. No matter what comes next, he said, I'll carry it. We'll carry it. Together. I pressed my lips to his shoulder, tasting the faint traces of coffee and the city air, feeling the steady pulse beneath my hand. I know, I whispered. And maybe that's what love is, holding each other, even when it hurts. Even when it scares you. The wind carried the faint hum of the city, the sound of life moving on around us. And yet, in that quiet balcony moment, we were suspended. Neither past nor future mattered. Only the ache and the beauty of now. Pain had sharpened our love, made it undeniable, and in the same breath, it had made us whole. I leaned back, looking at Ethan, seeing the lines of exhaustion etched into his face, the scars of our battles, the resilience that had grown from them. And I understood, finally, that love wasn't a story that ended neatly. It was a living, breathing thing, beautiful, terrible, and unforgettable. Where love hurts, I murmured, is also where it lives. He smiled, tired but unwavering. Exactly. And in that moment, I believed it completely.